Today we're going to be taking a look at some games that didn't make the SideGame library. So these are 10 games that we got rid of throughout this past couple of months in the SideGame library. So we're going to go ahead and go through them here. With that being said, let's get started. The first list that didn't make the cut is Pie Town. So this game is not so good. It has some cool ideas in it. Particularly, it has these dice that you're going to be using here. And the dice are not rolled, but they are used to mark the strength of your workers. Now, that's a cool idea, right? The dice are great, they're big and chunky, they're fun. However, the game is super lacking in choices and what to do, and it really becomes boring and really monotonous as you play. You're really not changing up much. You're getting resources, turning them into pies, and that's really it. You'll get to a point in the game where there's just not a lot to do, or what you're doing is just not that exciting. And it introduces this mechanic in the game where you're going to be trying to predict the pies of your opponents. You have secret recipes, and you're trying to predict these recipes. But the recipes, when you predict them at the end of the game, it's worth maybe only a little bit of points, and it's almost inconsequential the amount of points that you get out of this. And it's really not worth it to just try to predict what your opponent's pies are during the game, because if you do and you miss an ingredient or something key, you can lose a lot of points, and that might be the difference between winning or losing. So, unfortunately, Pie Town really falls flat after the first couple turns, and on repeat plays, it does not hold up. It's a lot longer than it needs to be, and the game itself is just not that exciting, not a lot of choices. So that's Pie Town. It's out of here. It's got a 5 from me. Up next is Archmage. Archmage is another 5. So Archmage, in my opinion, is a weaker version of Vindication. So Vindication, not my favorite game in the world, but it's still a good game. And Archmage uses the same mechanic of you're going to be taking colors and you'll be combining them in order to make better versions of those colors, of mixing, right? However, in Archmage, you're going to be using that to create these stronger abilities, essentially. So every time you unlock magic in this game, you get a card that relates to the magic that you've learned. If you learned the red card, you get the blood magic card. If you've earned the black one, you get the death magic card. If you increase that ability, you're going to learn the combination of the two. And once you get to further abilities, you'll get even stronger ones. So all the mixing of the different types. And there are also points at the end of the game. Now, this game is really interesting. You're going to be putting out these followers on the board, but the game, in my opinion, really suffers from that the spells that you're using are not exciting, and that is super sad, because you have this mechanic of combining these magics to make better magics, but the spells you get, it does not feel very much like you're a spellcaster, which is really sad. If you want a game that really captures this conversion, play Vindication. If you want a game that has you being a super strong magician, play something like Mage Wars. That would be my opinion on this game. So that one, it's out of the collection, and that's Archmage. Up next is Near and Far. So Near and Far here is the Ryan Lockett game that is sequel to Above and Below. We've got Now or Never coming out this year. But this game, it's just did not do it for me. The storytelling is cool. It's interesting. Sleeping Gods knocks that out of the park, though, and it incorporates the storytelling into meaningful gameplay. And that's where this game lacks, in my opinion, is the gameplay itself. Now, in this game, you're going to be moving around a map and placing out little tents, and that's kind of it. It's kind of sad, actually, because you have this interesting storytelling mechanic that can reward players more than other players, and it's honestly not that satisfying of a game. So I was a little frustrated with Near and Far. It's solid, it's average, but I would not go back to this one. I don't think this is one worth playing and diving into. You can feel the randomness of some events, and the game itself, what you're doing, not that good. So unfortunately, Near and Far is not in the collection. Up next is Nyctophobia. Now, Nyctophobia here has a really interesting premise. You are blind, and you are hiding from a murderer of some sort, a vampire, a axe murderer, a psycho. So it's a very scary theme, but the game itself really falls apart with the downtime and waiting, and it's really just kind of boring. Now, there's this funny picture that I took, credit to Daniel Danzer. They're playing a game at Essen in 2018 here. And this guy right here really sums up the game as a whole. Now, in this game, you play blind, so you have these glasses, which are just really cool, and you can't see what's happening, but you are waiting a lot. You're sitting there, you are not doing anything, and you're just waiting for everybody to take their turn. It's up to the person who is the murderer to kind of help everybody out with what they're doing. You've crafted this labyrinth in front of you, and man, this game just really drags. And another critique on this game is the player aids. So this game is a little bit iffy to teach at first because you have to have a player aid to teach people to play, but people are blind, so they can't see the player aids. They have to like put them under their glasses so they can see, but they're trying not to see the table. It's a cool idea, but the gameplay itself has way too much downtime, way too much waiting, and me too, man. Me too. This is exactly how I feel when I play this game. So this one, it's out of the library. Up next is Takenoko. Now this game is really cool. It's really beautiful. I love the bamboo. I love the whole aesthetic of it. It's really pretty. That's really where it stops being that exciting, in my opinion. In this game, you're kind of just doing stuff to do stuff, and I don't find it that exciting. I like that you have different objectives that you can go towards, but that's really it. It's very straightforward in what it's trying to do, but I don't find it something that I ever put out to get people super excited for a game. They like the art, but when they're playing, they're not really excited by the mechanisms that the game offers. Yes, it's cute. Yes, there's a panda. Yes, you've got these neat bamboo sticks, but the gameplay itself is not really that satisfying, so that's why it's leaving the library. All right, up next, we've got Dead of Winter, The Long Night. Now, Dead of Winter is a fine game. So I love the semi-co-op nature of it, but where this game really lacks, in my opinion, is the dice and the actions. So in this game, each player is going to be getting survivors that they'll be using to perform their actions. Every time you get a survivor, generally they're going to come with dice, and the more dice you have, the more stuff you can do. Now this can quickly become unbalanced because at certain points, whenever you send a character somewhere, if you roll this symbol on the die, the tooth here, your character immediately dies, that one you're using. So this could lead to a game where a person is controlling one character, everybody else has one character, somebody finds an extra character, they all of a sudden have two. Somebody else finds three characters, they all of a sudden have three. That person is having way more turn than everybody else, and somebody can lose their character, and it just becomes unfun, a lot of downtime, a little boring. They try to combat this with the crossroads cards. Each player gets a card, and if that thing happens, they play it and resolve a cool story, which is a great idea. But ultimately, the lopsidedness of the actions and the fact that you can basically be eliminated, like you lose almost all your actions, is super frustrating. And when it's a semi-co-op game specifically, that might put things in a lopsided fashion. Yes, it tells a story, but ultimately not the semi-co-op game for us. Nemesis fills this void a lot better, in my opinion, and that's the one that we'll be keeping in the library. So Dead of Winter, The Long Night, it's out of the library. Up next is King of New York. Now this game I do not like at all. I think it takes the fairly straightforward, fairly simple version of King of Tokyo, where you Yahtzee dice, you beat up people, you take the king. With King of New York, that adds a board that adds a lot of confusion. Not necessarily confusion, but busyness. So the brilliance of the initial King of Tokyo is it's very straightforward in what you're doing. But in this one, you've got a map that you're kind of traveling through. You've got different areas with different creatures, different objectives. It busies a game that should not be busy. Now, I don't really normally like the Yahtzee mechanic in games because it adds for really long turns. So, for example, you'll roll the dice, you have to analyze what you're going to keep, you roll them again, you analyze what you're going to keep, you roll them again. It can take quite a while when people weigh those decisions. And when you add all these additional components into the mix, it really adds to that analysis paralysis that can come from this game. The simplicity of the first one is wonderful. It's not my favorite game, but I can see the merits of it. But King of New York is not good. So this one is out of the library. That's King of New York. Yeah, peace. Up next is Vast, the Crystal Caverns. Now, Vast is a fascinating game. where you're going to be playing one of these very asymmetric, unique races in a very interesting way. Very similarly to Root, which is by far the superior version of this game, you have a game that you are playing by yourself. Now, the reason that this one is not good is because you play by your own set of rules and you're playing your own game, as opposed to just having different aspects compared to the other factions. You're playing a completely different game. Now, this adds to the learning curve, but even if you've learned the game well, the downtime and the length that this game takes for the gameplay that you're getting is not worth it. The game takes near 2-3 hours. You're playing with a high player count, and you want to play with a high player count because the game shines when it has all the different characters playing, but the game itself has you checking the other players to make sure that they're winning or they're not winning, to make sure that the game goes longer. I found this one to be very lopsided for the different players. If one player doesn't do what they're supposed to, the game falls apart. It's very unfortunate. It's such a cool idea. I love the artwork. I love the theme. I love the concept. But if you want a game like this, play Root. I would not recommend Vast the Crystal Caverns. So this one is out of the library. But yeah, it looks fantastic, right? You got all these pieces, but another big thing on this one is the edge cases. A lot of times interactions will come up that you'll have to confer the rules. The rulebook is not laid out very well. It is a beast to learn, a beast to clarify rules, discrepancies. It is not good. I do not get this one. Up next is Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. Now, this was one of the first really big guess what's going on kind of game, mystery crime-solving game. But there have been new ones that have been released that I would recommend in a heartbeat over Consulting Detective. Now, it's a good game, but you have to be ready to read. Read so much. And this game has you making leaps of logic that I found to be too much. When you're playing this game, you might go to a post office, and at this post office, it gives you a scene. And you're supposed to glean some bit of information from something small. I feel like this game presents a puzzle that is almost impossible to solve in a quick manner, and that's what you're trying to do. So you're putting yourself under these constraints in order to do it in a quick manner, which ultimately decreases the amount of fun and the amount of really crime solving you're able to do. So Consulting Detective is frustrating in the way it presents its information, the way it presents its puzzle. And man, if you're playing the game and you hear what Sherlock did to solve it at the end of the game, he's going to tell you what he did to figure out the answer. You just feel even worse because like there's no way anybody could have gotten that. So if you want a game like this, I would suggest Detective. I think that's a great game. It's also a lot of planning, but I feel like you can actually make conclusions in that game, as opposed to this one where you really do have to take those big leaps of logic. So that's another one that's out of the library. That's Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. And the last game on the list is Bob Ross, The Art of Chill. In Bob Ross, you are going to be collecting these paint cards, and you're going to be using them to finish whatever current painting is on display that Bob wants you to paint. So this game is okay. I like the colors, but it's just an okay game. And I would rather present people a game like Ticket to Ride. It has a very similar feeling where you're collecting cards and you're playing them to complete these routes as opposed to paintings. I love the progression in games like Ticket to Ride. This one is very simple, very straightforward. It's fine, but it's not one we're keeping in the library for sure. So this is Bob Ross, The Art of Chill. I do not think it needs to be in this library when we have other games that fit this niche. So that's all the games that we've kept in the SideGame library. If you have any questions about these games we got rid of, please let me know in the comments. If you have any games that you think that I made the wrong call on, let me know. But I feel pretty sound in these decisions, and I don't see me getting these games back at all. We play a lot of games, and not all of them are going to stay. If you have any other questions, please let me know in the comments. I hope you have a great rest of your day. SideGame strong.